Welcome back once again, all you nerds out there. This is Nerdy by Nature, and as always, I'm one of your hosts, Agent Smith.
And I'm Captain Rogers.
And as a reminder, wanted to let you, the listener, know where you can find us. So, of course, we are available streaming on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, audio only, Google Podcasts, Breaker, CastBox, and Anchor, our platform of choice for podcasting. So, Cap, in our last episode, we discussed the Crisis on Infinite Earths on the CW, the crossover event. And if you haven't checked that out yet, feel free to pause this one, go back, listen to it, and get all caught up. But for this episode, we're going to review the now renamed Harley Quinn Birds of Prey, which had a less than fantabulous opening weekend.
Yeah.
And it's received mixed reviews from critics and audiences alike, and it's the first DCEU film of 2020, and it had one of the worst opening weekends, roughly about $33 million, since Jonah Hex. Now, it's not on the same level as Jonah Hex by any means. And to be honest, I think, yes, facts are facts. It didn't have the best opening weekend, but it certainly didn't have the worst of all time. I mean, obviously the worst for this first DCEU film of 2020, as we just said, but I think there's some reasons, Cap, as to why this particular film hasn't been as well received.
No, definitely.
Let's talk about it. So, I think obviously most people that are moviegoers know and understand, and especially in the industry, February is one of those months where I don't want to say that movies go to die because Deadpool had success on Valentine's Day a few years back, so there are some exceptions.
Right.
But again, I think that had more of a cult following and was better advertised than Birds of Prey, in this case now Harley Quinn Birds of Prey, and so there's that working against it. February, just a lot of people aren't necessarily going out to the movies. You've never heard of a winter blockbuster. They're usually they're summer blockbusters for a reason.
Yeah, the big movies generally wait until around the end of March, beginning of April to start opening and expecting the big blockbuster numbers.
And then I don't know about you, Cap, but to me, I feel like this was also kind of a niche film where you really had to like these characters and wanted to go see them. Because let's be honest, just to bring up Deadpool again for reference, Harley Quinn is one of those characters where she can kind of be an annoyance, or if you're not all about that particular style of character or attitude or personality or fourth wall break, it could be a turnoff. And so some people may have been like, not my favorite character, not going to waste my money.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on talking about, Deadpool and Harley Quinn being a certain type of character, because, I didn't even really care for Deadpool in the comics. I only really liked the character because of Ryan Reynolds and what he's done with the character. And so I think that Harley Quinn is much the same in that Margot Robbie is perfect as that character. And, I mean, her playing Harley Quinn, she was basically born to play that part. And Ryan Reynolds playing Deadpool, he was basically born to play that part. So I think that is a big part of it.
And I think we also have to take in consideration that this particular film is somewhat of a follow-up to Suicide Squad. And of course that film left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, both critically and audiences as well.
Right.
And then with Birds of Prey, of course, some people may not know, but there used to be a very short-lived, that's probably why, TV series, same name, back in the early 2000s, so they may have heard, of course, initially Birds of Prey led in the title, and then followed with Harley Quinn's name, in that long, stringed-out explanation.
Right.
It's one of those situations where they could have heard Birds of Prey and had flashbacks or thought, not my favorite DC characters, I'll pass. It's got Harley Quinn too? Not that enticing.
Yeah.
Even as good as Margot Robbie's portrayal of Harley Quinn is. And so I think just that those number of different factors there were plenty of things working against this film for it not to have opening weekend success, in my opinion.
I'm the first to say that I was not especially excited for this movie just because of that. I mean, when I first saw the trailers, I didn't hate Suicide Squad when I first saw it in theaters, but every time I've watched it since, it just gets worse and worse to where I haven't had an urge to go back and watch it. And so watching the trailers for this very much gave me worry as far as that goes, because it looked very much like Suicide Squad in the trailers.
Well, and also, in the first, probably 20, 30 minutes of this particular film,
Definitely.
You and I both looked at each other and we were like, are we starting to walk down that same Suicide Squad path here? It's getting that same vibe. And there reaches a point where you're like, okay, this is either going to pick up and get good,
right,
or it's going to be a train wreck. And just not live up to expectations. And fortunately, I think that in our opinions for us, it did the beginning of that and went in a great direction. It really picks up and gets going in a fun way for everybody.
Definitely, yeah. After the first half hour or so, in my opinion, is when it really picks up and takes off. I was worried for that first 30 minutes, like you said, but it does get better, in my opinion.
I think it's also important to point out that in that first 20 minutes, that there's a lot of, probably what I would guess, fan service for those that really do love Harley Quinn as a character, because it's her at full throttle. So, of course, if you enjoy Harley Quinn and Margot Robbie and her portrayal, then the entire movie is going to be solid in your book. But for us, it was like, okay, we get it.
Right.
You know, let's go ahead and get into the actual movie here, if there is one. And there certainly is. So let's try something a little bit different on this episode for Nerdy by Nature. First, if you will, we're going to give you guys a plot summarization, and then go ahead and talk about our favorite scenes, and what we liked, what worked, what didn't, and so on and so forth. And so at this point, it's great to go ahead and say, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Harley Quinn, Birds of Prey, or Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn, whichever one you want to call it, totally up to you. We're going to go ahead and dive right into the film, give you this plot summarization, and talk about our favorite scenes, characters, and so forth. So picking up from Suicide Squad, as we've already mentioned, Harley Quinn is dealing with her and the Joker's breakup in what would you say, Cap, a less than healthy way?
Yeah.
As she pretends that they're still together for protection and to continue doing pretty much whatever she wants to whoever she wants, and eventually word gets out that she and Mr. J are done. She decides to blow up a chemical plant that bleached both of them and more or less pushed them to the opposite side of what you would call normal, and this explosion gets the attention of a Gotham detective named Renee Montoya, who eventually becomes a part of the yet-to-be-named Birds of Prey crew, and the movie uses flashbacks and side stories throughout to kind of explain who some of these Birds of Prey characters are, and Quinn eventually gets mixed up with the new bad guy in town, Roman Sionis, aka the Black Mask, played by Ewan McGregor, and eventually she winds up on his bad side. She's pretty much on most people's bad side throughout the film, which is a funny part in and of itself, and I didn't mind her narration throughout the film either, but we'll get to that in a minute. And so essentially, Sionis is looking for the Bertinelli family diamond, the Italian mob, there in Gotham. It's said to have their banking account codes and information lasered on the inside. This would grant him access to millions and millions of dollars. He can build his evil empire, pretty much fund whatever kind of evil plan he has cooked up. And then we enter in Cassandra Cain, or Cass, as she's known in the film, sort of a small-time young lady thief who picks the wrong pocket and winds up coming across that Bertinelli family diamond. She ends up eating the diamond, and so that gets turned sideways, and they, of course, then go on the hunt for her and the diamond. Both sides, Harley Quinn and Sionis, want to extract the diamond, so you can imagine how that goes. And in the end, it winds up being a showdown between Sionis and his mercenaries and Harley Quinn and the soon-to-be-named Birds of Prey. Quinn and Cass end up saving one another, and they blow up Sionis in a pretty big way. We'll talk about that later on in the episode here, and both Quinn and Cass become partners in crime, and the Birds of Prey are formed. So that pretty much wraps up in a bow the main plot for Harley Quinn, Birds of Prey. And so, Cap, let's go ahead and talk about some of our favorite scenes from the movie. I'm curious to see what yours were.
Well, there's several. I mean, I did enjoy the movie more than I thought I was going to. But I think, of course, the final climactic battle between everybody is up there. And then one thing that really stuck out to me, which really did a good job of putting in your mind that Black Mask was a bad guy. They did a really good job. There was a scene where he was in the club, and I can't remember exactly what they did, but I guess this group of people over to the side were laughing, and he just, for some reason, it got in his head that they were laughing at him. And so he went over and talked to them and picked one of them out of the group, and it was a woman. And like, he very seriously, told her to stand up on the table and told her to strip down and start dancing, and it was just very unnerving and very uncomfortable for pretty much everybody, including the other characters in the movie. But I mean, it was just a very, very good scene because Ewan McGregor did a really good job portraying this unhinged character. I mean, and it just solidified that he was the bad guy of the movie.
And I'll say, as uncomfortable as that scene was, I think it was definitely necessary because up until that point, Ewan McGregor, for the most part, sure, he's unhinged, but he was really more so eccentric and egotistical and still, in my opinion, pulled off a good villain. But to your point, a lot of audiences and critics were wondering and checking the validity of Black Mask as a villain. And so, again, up until that point, it had been a lot of just these shenanigans and running about town.
Right, and it was almost more comedic and jokey. I mean...
Exactly, especially from Harley Quinn and some of the members of what would soon be Birds of Prey. So it's like, okay, well, can we really take Roman Sionis seriously as the main antagonist? And I think in this particular scene that you're speaking about, his club, absolutely. We realized it's a quiet scene. Like, it's literally just him audibly telling her what to do. There's no music playing. He says dance and start to take off your clothes, but there's no music to go along with that. So it's this creepy quietness, and everyone's just uncomfortably watching this play out. It's
right, and you can very much tell that she's with another dude at the table, too, and he doesn't do anything. And it just really shows you that he was just as unnerved and scared, I guess, as everybody else was.
And I think it also shows the level of power and control that Roman has. Of course, obviously, it's his club, but regardless, I think his reputation precedes itself of, yeah, okay, she's going to do this, and she's going to have to deal with it, and nobody else will, because he is who he is, and he's one bad dude. And I think he was reminding people of, hey, yeah, I'm the guy.
Yeah.
In this case, the bad guy.
Right.
But that, yeah, I agree. I think that was a very good scene, and probably, if I had a top 5 of scenes from this film, that one would be in my top 5 for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's been a while since I've seen the movie, and so just thinking back on it, that one just popped into my head, like, as soon as I started going through the movie in my mind, and just, because it was, Ewan McGregor did a really good job in this movie. Like, I was surprised at him playing a villain, and him doing well at it.
Oh, yeah, and I think for a lot of folks, us ourselves included, we were kind of skeptical as to whether or not he could pull off being the bad guy, because, I mean, let's be honest, this is, Edward Bloom from Big Fish and Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Right.
So it was like, can he handle a walk on the dark side?
Right.
And so to talk about one of my favorite scenes personally, it had to be pretty much the entire police station scene where Quinn goes in initially looking to find Cassandra Cass, and she's got her fun gun, she's got her baseball bat, got a hammer, just all these little tricks and tools of her trade, and it's just classic Harley Quinn. And of course, she's not literally taking these cops out, but she's stunning them pretty good with
it was
different stun pellets, and of course they're also laced with different means of paint and different confetti, and it's just a kooky wacky display as she goes through and knocks people out.
It was very comic book-esque and Harley Quinn-esque. I mean, it was just awesome in that regard.
Oh, for sure. And then to expand upon that, of course, later on, obviously, she's not the only person looking for Cass. These mercenaries throughout the city are hot on the trail as well. And so they break into the police station, fire alarm is pulled, sprinklers go, it's starting to pour down with water, and we get pretty awesome, from a cinematic standpoint or cinematography, the angles on some of the water fight scenes I really appreciated, and you really got a sense that, they were just going at it mano-a-mano. The water drops were flying, bad guys were going left and right, so those scenes were really cool. Then, from there, of course, they dry off in one of the evidence rooms where they keep, guns and drugs and things that they've collected from their stops and their busts. And we get a hilarious moment where she's taken on 3 or 4 mercenary guys at one time, and she gets behind this big stack of what is clearly a crate of cocaine. They're shooting at it. A little bit of it puffs in the air, and she whiffs it up just a little bit, gets an adrenaline rush, takes them on with a bat, and get a really cool scene where she essentially plops the bat down on the concrete at such an angle to where it can hit the concrete, smack the guy in the face, and then ricochet back into her hand.
Yeah, that was like almost like a Cap moment with
sort
with the shield.
And I'm not sure on the physics there.
Yeah. Well, I know Cap's shield is known to defy physics, but
But the baseball bat, maybe a little bit of a stretch, but still, nevertheless, a cool scene to watch, just transpire. So the whole thing from start to finish, to me, was just a thrill ride in that movie. And I think, arguably, we talked about this before the episode, Cap, it's really where this movie picks up and takes off.
Right.
And you're like, okay, here we go. This is what I paid my movie ticket money for.
Right. Yeah, that was definitely the point where it moved from a, oh no, what have you done moment to a, this movie could be decent, and so I really enjoyed that scene as well. And the climactic battle at the end is much like that. I mean, it's just as good. And of course, that's more than just Harley. That's all of them.
That's everybody at their finest, full tilt. I think we get to see a crescendo of the entire crew,
right,
just at their best. Huntress is taking people out left and right with her crossbow. We've got Renee Montoya doing her thing as a hardened veteran cop, and then of course Canary is doing her thing as a well-trained metahuman crime fighter that we didn't really know about up until certain points in the movie, but still, we just did see everybody go full tilt. And I think even at one point, Cass gets a little bit of involvement as well. Not a huge role, but she's still able to defend herself, and they make their way out of the funhouse, and it's just a really good time. I think my favorite moment is the movie's not afraid to make fun of itself, because at one point, Canary asks, at what point did she have time to change into skates?
Yeah.
And so, because she was just wearing basic, I think, sneakers or Converse before, and so I thought that was good that the movie itself wasn't afraid to poke a little bit of fun at the genre as a whole, or even some of the characters. And we got some fourth wall breaks in between from Harley Quinn, which I think is part of the course for her character in the comics. So,
oh yeah, definitely.
So that was nice as well. And yeah, that climactic battle scene between Sionis' gang and Birds of Prey and Harley Quinn and company, I mean, that was just about as fun as it gets at the movie theaters, in my opinion, as far as that moment.
Oh yeah.
From terms of cinema.
I mean, and it was even awesome towards the end when Sionis takes off with the little girl, with Cass, and Harley and Huntress work together to go after him. That whole chase scene of them with her on her skates and Huntress pulling her along from her motorcycle, there was a lot of good action, and it made up for a lot of the stuff that was lacking in the first part of the movie.
Absolutely. And then, of course, as we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, Sionis gets blown up in a really big way. And so what happens is they wind up at the end of this pier, and there's all kinds of different statues of founders of Gotham's history. And Harley only has one shot, one bullet in the chamber to work with, and she knows she has to make it count. And she thinks that she makes it count, but doesn't, winds up blowing off a statue head.
Right.
But fortunately, Cass, being the good pickpocket that she is, used that one-shot diversion to reach in to Sionis' pocket and pull out a pin from a grenade that he had on him. And then, of course, Harley was able to kick him off the dock real quick, and he splits in half from the explosion. So, yeah, I didn't see it going down that way.
Yeah, no, I didn't either. It was very, in your face, boom. It showed everything.
The whole thing.
It was hilarious for a bad guy, it's hilarious as those things can be.
Yeah, he quite literally went out with a bang.
Yeah.
So, I promise that's as terrible as the puns will be for this podcast. But ultimately, I think where we're getting at is that this particular film was a lot better than we expected it to be. It had very redeeming moments from a lackluster trailer, and I think ultimately it's one that's worth going and watching for yourself and forming your own opinion. Because again, I think especially now, a lot of times good movies or movies that have good intentions will get mixed reviews. So it's always important to not necessarily listen to not only us, but the critics in general, and just go watch it and enjoy it for what it is. Just a good, powerful, female-led character cast.
Absolutely.
And speaking of the cast, let's go ahead and segue here, Cap, and talk about the cast as a whole. I think we both can agree, and we've talked about this even before the episode, that both Robbie and McGregor pretty well carried the movie, but I did think that there were some bright spots in some of the casting choices.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to say really that I felt like anybody was terrible in it. Everybody played their parts well. It just, I think Margot Robbie, obviously, her portrayal and her transformation into Harley Quinn is just spot on, and we praise that over and over again. But Ewan McGregor, like we've talked about previously, I think he's just a top-notch actor in general, and really transforms himself into whatever he's doing. So I feel like the two of them, more than anything else, carried the movie. I mean, like I said, that's not to hate on the others. I felt like everybody did a good job, and there was really nobody that I felt was a bad actor or actress or anything like that.
Yeah, I think overall, like you said, they all did a good job respectively in their roles, and so let's just take a moment, Cap, and go over the highlighted cast members that we've got here. So, of course, Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, Ewan McGregor as Roman Sionis, aka the Black Mask, Rosie Perez as Renee Montoya, the detective and cop. It's a part of Birds of Prey. Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Helena Bertinelli, the Huntress, also slash crossbow killer, which was a hilarious moment throughout the film where people kept dubbing her as this crossbow killer, and she's like, "I'm not the crossbow killer.
Yeah,
I'm the Huntress."
She's dubbed herself as the Huntress,
and I think even some people were like, "Oh, are you the Bertinelli girl?" And she's like, "Oh my god." How does this keep happening? I am the Huntress. So, as you can tell, which one of my sub-characters was my favorite.
Right.
Then we've got Journey Smollett-Bell as Dinah Lance, Black Canary. And we got Ella J. Basco, or Bosco, not sure which way to pronounce that, as Cassandra Cain, or Cass, little girl pickpocket in the film. I think for a lot of people that's probably going to be their favorite just because she's this rebel character that a lot of people can relate to,
right?
Especially for young girls growing up as well who kind of want to be cooler. She had a lot of swag in this film, I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got Chris Messina as Victor Zsasz, and then Ali Wong had a nice appearance as Ellen Yi, one of the previous love interests, or at least it's heavily implied so, that she's the district attorney that had a parting or falling out with Rosie Perez's character, Renee Montoya.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of them that we really haven't mentioned much is Victor Zsasz, and honestly, he was probably one of the, I wouldn't say disappointments. I'm not that well versed on that character, but I mean, I thought he was fine in the movie, but to me, he felt more like just another lackey to the main villain. And from what I've heard and from what others have said is that in the comics he's like a stone cold serial killer and is a lot more of a major character than he was portrayed in this movie.
And from what we've researched, it definitely seems like he's a serious threat as well. So to be cast as a right-hand man to Roman, I mean, I'm sure he's worthy of that position.
Right.
But the way that he was portrayed in this film, I have to agree, it seems like it was almost a throwaway character.
Right.
And one that me personally, I would have liked to have known a little bit more of a backstory on, which we get a small tinge of that when they mentioned that he was one of the people that gunned down the Bertinelli family to kind of put a stranglehold on their own territory and claim that for themselves from the Bertinelli mafia mob, so to speak. But I think that definitely, of all the people that we just listed, was an opportunity missed for this movie for sure.
Definitely, because I mean, he wasn't bad in the movie by any means, but once I heard how big of a character he was in the books and that he was more of a major villain, I can see where people that liked that character would be disappointed by it.
For sure. And just real quick to go back to Ali Wong's character, Ellen Yi, certainly a small character, but in case those of you are hearing that name for the first time, she's also a well-known stand-up comedian and has been an actress in other things on Netflix, and so she's got certain specials as Baby Cobra and Hard Knock Wife, so wanted to throw those in there in case anybody's interested. I recommend watching both of them. She's pretty hilarious at what she does.
And speaking of smaller roles, or what we kind of feared was going to be a smaller role, going back to Dinah Lance, the whole movie I was watching and wondering, is she ever going to do her canary cry? I mean, like, is she going to have her powers or what? And it was a little hard to go with until finally they did do something towards the end. But I mean, like, I was sitting there thinking there's a lot more to this character than just being a singer and what they were portraying her as. I thought maybe that they had decided that, they wanted to keep this movie a little more grounded and not have any kind of metahuman type powers, but thankfully I was wrong, and it does come to be towards the end, but it was slow going in that regard for that character.
Oh yeah, her development took a little bit of time over the course of this film. And of course, earlier on some scenes, you get one where she's in the club singing and she hits that super high note and breaks the martini glass, which, granted, we've heard myths and rumors that certain singers can do that.
Right.
But it was like, ooh, is this foreshadowing to, her actually getting to use her metahuman power, her canary cry, which it's a real quick moment in the trailer, so it's hard to catch. But if you notice it, it's one that, after we left the theater, I said, man, I'm glad that we got that.
Right.
Because I thought, oh, is this just going to be a trailer moment that they use to bring people in, and then they cut it on the floor, or it ends up on the cutting room floor, as you often hear.
Right, I mean, and like you said, it's a extremely quick shot in the trailer. I didn't even notice it. You told me about it, and we went back and watched it and saw it, but I mean, like, that's why I was confused and not sure whether they were going to do it or not, because I didn't even know it was in the trailer. But like I said, thankfully they did do something with it, and she was more of a powerful character than they let on at the beginning.
Right, and it ultimately wound up being well worth the wait in the end, I think, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And so, speaking of N, that's going to at least wrap up our main discussion of Harley Quinn, Birds of Prey. So let's go ahead, Cap, here and give it a true nerdy by nature ranking. I'll start. For me, look, are there some comic book inaccuracies throughout this film with the characters top to bottom? Certainly. There's no dispelling that. And facts are facts. Didn't have the best opening weekend. I think there's, again, as we talked about at the beginning of the episode, a number of reasons. The fact that it was released in February and not this summer. The fact that, if you're not a Harley Quinn fan or Birds of Prey fan, there's no real draw for the general audience. It's a very niche film. And
I will say, you gotta admit that Suicide Squad definitely hurt it. There's no denying that.
There's no denying that. But I think ultimately for what this film is, and if you choose to go watch it, it's one that I personally feel like won't be disappointed with, because it is a solid film. Again, Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn and Ewan McGregor as Roman Sionis carry the film in a good way.
Oh, yeah.
And their back and forth is a lot of fun to watch, and there's plenty of moments for everybody to enjoy this film and have a good time, and it's very watchable. So
Agreed.
For me, I'm going to clock this in at a 3.5 nerds.
Actually, I was going to put it right there at the same number, honestly. I was very surprised by this movie, and pleasantly surprised. I mean, it definitely feels like a movie that I will see again. Maybe not in theaters, but it will definitely be a movie that I could watch over a couple of times. So I really suggest people go and watch it and form your own opinion versus listening to what others say about it, honestly.
Because let's be real, I think nowadays especially the DCEU often gets a bad rap, and I think with some of the recent films like Shazam and Aquaman and others, you can tell that they're actively making an effort to clean up some of their messes and to at least give us palatable films to watch and enjoy. And the hope for us is that it gets better from here.
Absolutely, and they're very much on the path of trying to separate all of their characters and trying to stay away from connecting things very much. I will say that was somewhat of a bummer to me in this movie, that there was not a mention of much of any other DC characters other than the ones that were in the movie. I understand why they did it, and honestly, they're being more successful in separating their characters and trying to split up the continuity and keep everybody separate, but it was a bummer because of what could be if they did it right,
And I think for a lot of people, it will be nice for DC as a whole to start connecting those dots with these characters and with these films. But again, I agree with you. I think it needs to be certainly done in the right way, and I'm sure they're trying to figure that out over at DC headquarters, or at least I imagine, they haven't called us.
Right.
And so, Cap, as we close out this episode, we had mentioned Suicide Squad a few times throughout this episode, and of course, Suicide Squad 2, or The Suicide Squad, I should say, is going to be released into theaters next summer. Hopefully will be a summer blockbuster. It seems like it's on pace to be a lot better than what we got initially, as we've talked about before. And of course, relevant to this podcast episode, because Margot Robbie will be reprising her role as Harley Quinn, and we've got a lot of big names coming back in their respective roles and being added to this particular movie. Mm-hmm. So how excited are you about Suicide Squad?
I'm very excited about the next one. Like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of the first one. Neither of us, I guess, really are. But being helmed by James Gunn, I think it will be a lot better. And if it feels anything like Guardians of the Galaxy, that was a big surprise and a big hit for Marvel. So I have a feeling that this one will feel more like that. And I think that will be really good for the movie, and all the obscure characters that he's bringing in from DC past and DC Comics, I think is going to be interesting to see, if nothing else.
Yeah, and I think that's my only worry about the film is just hopefully they won't go too far left field.
Right.
And they'll ground some of those more obscure characters that we're going to get. Just to name one as an example, King Shark, I believe, is rumored to be involved. So, we'll see what that looks like.
Yeah.
And I think overall, though, with this particular cast list that we've got, I won't name them all, there's too many, but just to hit the highlights here, we've got John Cena, Jai Courtney, of course, coming back as Captain Boomerang, Joel Kinnaman coming back as Rick Flag, Taika Waititi, not quite sure exactly how he'll be involved, but that will be interesting. Idris Elba is going to be in the movie, so that's fantastic. Big fan of his personally.
Oh, me too.
Michael Rooker, of course, worked with James Gunn on all the Guardians of the Galaxy films, so he's always solid. And Pete Davidson from SNL. So again, not really sure how he's going to factor into the movie, but seems like we've got a lot of star power here. And then Viola Davis is also returning as well.
Right.
So
as Amanda Waller.
Correct. And so I think it's really going to be what I hope is a solid film. And also, fun fact, Nathan Fillion will be in the film. So for fans of the show Firefly, you'll have a reason or an angle to watch there. And if you're curious, we actually did a Nerdy by Nature episode and review of the Firefly series, so by all means go back and listen to that episode if you're just new to Nerdy by Nature.
Yeah, and I've actually been hearing talks of a possible Firefly revival, so that'll be interesting if that happens.
That would be very exciting, and I think a lot of us nerds would love for that to come back and have a second chance for sure.
Definitely.
And so that's going to really wrap things up for us here on this edition of Nerdy by Nature. As always, we thank you for listening, so be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to this podcast, share it across the internet and any means of social media that you can think of, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Let anybody that you would think would be interested in this realm and our episodes to know about us. By all means, feel free to join our Facebook group. Excited to announce that I believe we eclipsed the 90-member mark, so that's very exciting, and we'll start to, because we've reached that mark, as we mentioned in previous episodes, we'll start to interact with you all a little bit more and maybe create some polls, get your thoughts and comments, and maybe even if you're comfortable with it, try to sprinkle some of those into our discussions of our movie reviews and comic book runs. So we're definitely excited about the direction that our podcast is taking. And with that, cap our next episode. Since the Oscars were recently, it's one that was very eventful for sure. Of course, Joaquin Phoenix taking home the Oscar for Best Actor for his performance in Joker, and then Parasite, I believe, won Best Picture. That also got Best Director by Bong Joon-ho. A very exciting, big moment for him for being an international film. Mm-hmm. And we're going to actually choose to review the movie 1917, a war drama that took home the Oscars. I believe it was 3 of them for cinematography, sound mixing, and visual effects. And when we watch the trailers for some of these other films that we've done reviews on for 1917, it's one of those that we didn't quite get around to or have the time to watch, but we said, maybe, it looks like it could be good, and evidently it certainly is. When you win an Oscar, it's because you've done something right.
Right.
So we're excited to go watch that Oscar-winning film and give you guys a full Nerdy by Nature review, so be on the lookout for that. And until then, I'm Agent Smith signing off.
And I'm Captain Rogers. God bless.